She's a lady. Whoa, 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 she's a lady. Talking about that little lady. And the lady is mine.
Hi, my name is Grace Lee, and I made a film called The Grace Lee Project, which is screening now at the Film Forum. Happy holidays from The Barry Z Show.
Hi, it's Barry Z from The Barry Z Show, celebrating the new year with filmmaker Grace Lee, who has this great documentary playing right here at the Film Forum called The Grace Lee Project, and it's about what?
It's about many different women named Grace Lee, which is a very common Asian American woman's name. And it's about identity and stereotypes and many other things.
What about doing something called The Bruce Lee Project?
Actually, did you know that Bruce Lee's mother was Grace Lee?
What? Wow. So you won't want to miss this. Keep on watching this great interview and see this great film called The Grace Lee Project. And they can get more information by ringing up your website?
Yes, it's gracelee.net.
Hi, it's Barry Z from The Barry Z Show, talking to filmmaker Grace Lee, who has a great new film here at the Film Forum, and it's called The Grace Lee Project.
Well, The Grace Lee Project is a documentary about women named Grace Lee, which is an incredibly common Asian American woman's name. So it's a film that sort of explores Asian American female identity, stereotypes, and hopefully is entertaining along the way. Grace Lee is American-born. She's of Korean ethnicity, and her parents are immigrants. She lives in California. She's 25 years old. She's heterosexual, single, and she averages 3.5 years of piano lessons. She's 5'3". She graduated from college and probably has a master's degree, at least. She has combination skin. Does any other name scream generic Asian girl more than Grace Lee? I even get this description of Grace Lee from other Grace Lees.
When I was in high school, I went to school with another Grace Lee.
She was nice.
Nice and quiet.
Quiet and smart.
I didn't know her very well, but she just looked like a typical Asian.
How many people did you find with the name Grace Lee, other than yourself?
There are hundreds and thousands.
Hundreds and thousands
of women named Grace Lee. And but for the film, I actually only personally met about 40. I corresponded with many more through the internet or on the phone, but shooting, I probably shot 30 to 40 Grace Lees, but about 5 or 6 are in the film. With a simple click of the mouse, my message goes out. The response is overwhelming. Grace Lees contact me from all over the world. They're mostly from California and New York, but Grace Lees log in from places like Iowa City and Singapore, England, and the Cayman Islands.
I was a clumsy, fat kid, and being named Grace seemed to me like a terrible curse.
Oh, my name is so common.
It's so like Christian-y.
It wasn't like Monica or
Emily or
Jennifer or Tiffany or Heather.
I think if I would have been named Tammy, it might have been different.
I love having the name Grace Lee.
How did this come about?
Well,
Getting mail for another Grace Lee.
no, it actually didn't happen that way. I grew up in the Midwest where nobody had the name Grace Lee, and there weren't a lot of Asian people around. So I thought it was really special, unique. I was born and raised in Columbia, Missouri. Population 70,000. My parents immigrated from Korea in the early 1960s and eventually settled in the Midwest. I live in Los Angeles now, but when I tell people where I'm from, I'm usually met with puzzled stares. I mean, let's face it. When you think of someone from the Show Me State, you think of someone like this, or a family like this. You don't think of my family. It wasn't until I started living in, New York and then later California where when I would introduce myself, people would always say, "Oh, I know another Grace Lee." And these other Grace Lees are always sort of the stereotypically perfect, kind of overachieving, straight A student, kind of quiet, violin prodigy Harvard grads, you know.
Was that you?
And that was not me. So I started feeling like a loser in comparison. And so I didn't feel comfortable judging the other Grace Lees, and I wanted to find out, you know, who were these other Grace Lees? Why didn't anyone stay in touch with them? And, you know, what is it about this name that kind of represents what it means to be an Asian woman?
Like my mom says, I was named for the grace of God too. And I'm definitely not alone. Out of all the Grace Lees who registered on my website, a good 40% were named for the Christian idea of grace. And a surprising number of those Grace Lees are the daughters of ministers and missionaries. I even learned a new term, PK.
Pastor's kid. So they always say there's two kinds of PKs. There's a kind of PK that goes to church and is really good and, you know, becomes a pastor too, and then there's other kind who goes in the total opposite direction. And whenever people find out my dad's a minister, they're like, oh, well, that explains it.
How many Grace Lees are in this film?
I focus on about 5 or 6 Grace Lees in the film, but we catch glimpses of many others.
Every one of us who lives in this Catholic society has been damaged by the society, and to create a new society where there's not only struggle about against what exists, but also transform ourselves.
And I became so active in the Black Power movement that FBI records of that time say that I was probably Afro-Chinese.
Grace Lee Boggs is a writer and activist who has devoted herself to social change, primarily in the Black community. Her life is a whirlwind of meetings, speaking engagements, and opportunities to mentor young people, which basically includes everybody under 80.
How did you do the research?
I set up a website, which is gracelee.net, and I sent an email to everybody I knew saying, do you know a Grace Lee? Do you know people who know a Grace Lee? Or better yet, are you Grace Lee? Please come to this website and fill out my survey. And it just sort of snowballed because I think everybody knows a Grace Lee or thinks they know a Grace Lee.
Why do you call it the Grace Lee Project?
Project seemed like an appropriate term because, you know, it's sort of quasi-scientific, you know, it's kind of like an experiment, an investigation, and, you know, I don't purport it to be scientific at all, but just sort of my own journey and unlocking, you know, the secrets of Grace Lees.
Tell me about women who make films.
The organization is called Women Make Movies, and I think it's the oldest educational distributor of films by women directors, and, you know, they have the works of so many directors that you've heard of before, Julie Dash, or, you know, a lot of people mostly working in the independent world, documentaries and features, and so yeah, it's a great organization.
What was this movie for? Is it for the Asian community?
No, I think this movie is for everybody. I mean, I think that Asian Americans might get something extra out of it because there's so few films about Asian Americans, but I really...
Why is that?
There just aren't that many filmmakers who... I mean, I really feel like, you know, people tell stories that they want to tell, and, you know, I don't necessarily just want to make films about Asian Americans, and I don't, but... You know, this one was obviously very personal to me, and it's a film that, you know, it sort of became an obsession, and I wanted to make it.
And it breaks stereotypes, doesn't it?
I hope so, yes, yeah.
So it's you and Ang Lee, then?
Yes, Uncle Ang.
You know Uncle Ang? No. I mean, is he your uncle?
No, I wish.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kicking butt with Brokeback Mountain now?
No, he's amazing. I think I would love to, you know, follow in his footsteps.
The bottom line is, we're around each other and this thing grabs hold of us again in the wrong place, in the wrong time, and we're dead.
How do they contact you and find out more about the film?
Oh, you can go to my website, which is gracelee.net, and you can watch a trailer there.